Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where I believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And where we also believe that when you're in touch with you, with who you are and your true identity, that it changes the actions that you take in life, therefore changing your identity. It's a beautiful thing, my friends. We're going to dive into all of that today. I can't wait to walk through it with you. How are you? How are you? And are you liking this switch for season 2? I hope it feels fresh. I hope it feels like new and good stuff and just a different angle to see things, right? To be invited into a little bit more of a different element of the story. If you're new with us, in the first season of the Mindset Check podcast, we go through my journal from when I'm 15 and pregnant and the rockiness inside of it. Okay, tons of awesome, really juicy, good stuff. So if you haven't heard it, you should probably go listen to it. But in season 2, we come into how my current husband and I got together, and he is sharing all of his experiences behind what was happening for him on the other side of the story. And then you start to get glimpses of how our lives were intertwined because we went to school together when we were young, and really cool ways that our stories intersected and overlapped, and the way that we came together is fun. And it's just really fun to be able to take a look at someone else's story so that we can all learn from it. And that's the goal of the podcast. The goal of the podcast is just to break down life in ways that help us see that we have more power than we think we do in everyday things that we all go through, right? As a side note, I want to share with you something, just a small something from my life that happened in the last week so that it can encourage you to make sure that you're not taking advantage of the normal and good things that are in your life. So I attended a funeral of my neighbor who is 2 years my senior, and we're distantly related. So her husband is cousins to my brother-in-law. And I was so moved and rocked at her funeral of the power and the incredible person that she is. You know, I think at funerals we learn a lot about another person, and I think we learn a lot about ourselves when we listen in a way that invites that. And I just only wanted to share this with you surfacely. I might talk more about this later, but I only wanted to share this with you just to help you have a little glimpse at life and having a reminder that we think that tomorrow is going to happen. We think that everyone around us will go on living the same way that we have for a long time. And I just bring this up to you to help you sit in a state of gratitude for everything around you that really matters. That really matters. And most of the time, the things that are around us that really matters, we often take for granted. And so I just wanted to drop you into a space to help you find a little bit of gratitude in your day. Just to hug the people that you love extra close tonight for no reason, okay? For no reason. And just to be in a state where you're grateful, where you walk through life grateful to be living each day. All right, I hope that feeds your heart a little bit. I know there's more to come on that. But let's jump into today's podcast episode. Just for your information, there are a couple of things that come up in today's podcast that might be a little mature for little ears. So just a heads up on that. Everything else in the episode is pretty self-explanatory. Let's jump in.
Sophomore year, November 1993. I just turned 16 and my new church leaders have asked us to be writing in our journals. It's been many years since I wrote in a journal. I have been sitting in my room looking through my drawer at all these folded notes I have kept since middle school. I also have the wallet-sized school pictures of friends over the years. It feels hard to write about anything positive right now. Some of us were kicked off the football team for making some stupid decisions at a party, and I'm grounded for a while. I still can't believe the others didn't get in trouble. I'm sure the coaches know about them too. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face when I had to tell him why I was kicked off. I feel lucky he has never yelled at me, and I never want to see that disappointed look again. I felt so terrible. But setting that aside, I have never felt so crushed, devastated, and sad. I learned the worst news ever last summer. Misha got pregnant and would only be doing the first quarter. It just ended, and she won't be around anymore. It gets worse. She's already married to the guy, to Jesse. I had him in my biology class last year, and I noticed they started hanging out towards the end of the year. What could she possibly see in him? He doesn't even seem her type. I just don't get it. She's only 15. She can't even drive yet. We are only sophomores. He's already 18, maybe 19. And just like that, she is gone forever. No more watching her as a cheerleader. No more looking forward to asking her out when these juniors and seniors are finally out of the way. I truly thought my time would come to take her to homecoming or prom. I even thought I might get her as my girlfriend again. She is the only girl I have ever truly liked. How was I so stupid to let my friends convince me to dump her in the 6th grade? I have never stopped liking her. So many things that are now just memories. Having to see her kiss Darren after we broke up. Having to see her wear Rusty's all-star jacket. Her mom letting us get out of the van to run through sprinklers at the college. Missing out on her birthday party because I was at Lake Powell. I so wanted to be there to be around her again. Lying to Danny Black and telling him she was still my girlfriend and showing him her picture. Riding in the car next to her after Kenny Lindsay's party. Mrs. Fotheringham's 7th grade core class and all the madness that year. Misha getting into a fist fight with Kelly. Me feeling terrible to not stand up for her at Mackenzie's school's out party. Playing tennis with her and her cousin Jody. Always paying attention to all her new school clothes. Every year. Convincing her by the lockers downstairs to give me a kiss when I turned 15. Having Cassie update me on cheerleader camp and discreetly asking about Misha. She had the best legs, jumps, and herkies of all the girls our age. Wishing it was my head on her lap on the bus and not Dustin's. Crammed next to her in the back of her sister Shelley's car while going to KB. Blake and Landon having her show her toned stomach on the bleachers. There are no other girls at CHS like her, none. I hope everything will be okay for her. I'm sure I'll keep thinking about her and what might have been. I'm really going to miss her.
Ooh, a lot of really raw, real, and vulnerable information. Yeah, everything Jake shared is just little flashes, from his life, from my life. It's interesting. It's interesting to try to decide which one I really want to break down with you and what I think deserves the most attention. On the lightest note, I will say that my mom, letting us out of the van to run through the sprinklers is definitely a highlight memory in my life. She would drop us off on one side of the park, and then the sprinklers were going all over in the park, and we had to try to run straight through the middle without getting too wet and get back to where we could all pile in together and scream and yell about how wet we got or how wet we didn't get. That's a good memory. And yes, these are all of Jake's friends, like Darren and Rusty, these different friends of his. Remember, I told you his friends convinced, I guess, him to dump me, and then they asked me out. So it's kind of the way with, being in 6th grade. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things. There is a note that says Misha getting in a fist fight with Kelly Wow. It's true. It's true. And it was propelled by another boy. I don't really want to say his name because it's kind of throwing him under the bus, but he has a really cool name. Like one of those names that when you say it, it adds even just more credibility to the story. But the point is he like kind of stirred up the contention between us and like planned this whole fight. Like I'm pretty sure he was like, Misha, Kelly wants to fight you, you know, and to Kelly, like, Kelly, Misha's coming to fight you. I'm not sure her side, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of the way that went down. And it was like a high heated moment and something that I didn't even want to be in, but I found myself in, and then I needed to like take a stand for myself. So, gosh, hard stuff. I had a lot of hard rumors spread about me when we were in the 6th grade. Just tough things, you know? Lots of different groups of people wanting to like beat me up, and you know, there's a lot of bullies and they kind of have it out for people who maybe it seems like things are going well for. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting topic to think about. But we come to a couple of things. There's 2 big things I want to talk to you about. And there's something else that I need to mention when he talks about getting married to Jesse and like what could she possibly even see in him. We do talk about how, you know, I was very pursuable, I will say. I was a pretty pursuable girl. And I think that most kids are, really. I think most kids are pursuable. I think it is wise of adults to think of the conversations that we can have with the younger ones, right? Our kids and such, their friends, and talking to them about like, what do you want? And what is it that you want to pursue? Like, are there boys that you think are cute? Not just who's pursuing you. I think that's kind of an interesting and a very good flip. But the 2 main things that I really want to talk to you about today is I want to talk to you about getting in trouble in life and the best approach for both ourselves or for us as an influence in others' lives when they get in trouble. I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about this circumstance that Jake mentioned. We'll talk about this one first. This one is about him. He says, I felt terrible not to stand up for her at Mackenzie's school's out party. So this was a really big event in my life, one that I never spoke of outside of, I don't even know if I like brought it up and talked to my friends about what happened, because we kind of brushed it off like those, you know, dumb boys. So here's what happened. We were at a after school, you know, school's out party. The party was huge. There was a lot of people there. It wasn't the kind of party where there was, I mean, we were young. There was no there was no substance there. It was just a ton of kids having fun and hanging out, probably music. There was a park by her house. I don't remember all the things that we did. But there was a circumstance where some of these boys did something to me in the name of laughing and having fun. They tied my hands behind my back. They put a blindfold around me. They put me down. I was laying on something like a table. And there was everyone in the party. I don't know that everyone saw everything that happened because it was like a circle, almost like how a fight happens, right? Everybody was kind of crowded around seeing what was happening. And these boys lifted up my shirt and like showed for everybody to see. And, you know, had a total laugh, thought it was so funny. And then I just kind of, once they put my shirt down, kind of like set me free. I remember I kind of went into my friend's room and just kind of hung out in there. Like I didn't want to be with everybody And it's interesting to me that Jake looks back on that experience feeling terrible that he didn't stand up and do something. And I really, there's so much inside of this to break apart, because I know that when things happen, if we are not trained to do anything, often we become disabled. Like, we don't know even what to do. And we might not have the standing, so to say, to step forward and do something, right? Like, if he is also threatened by those boys in a certain way, then that also affects his ability to act. Interesting. And also, like, what we're going to talk about even more with getting in trouble, what he believes about himself in that moment, in that millisecond, also determines the way that he acts. And I think that when we're young, we haven't been faced with a lot of these situations before. And I believe that the regret, being in a situation and then later looking back at it with regret, shapes what we will do the next time. Because I think that regret says, I'm never gonna stand by anymore when someone does that. Or, we tend to then make some definition in our head about something, right? About the way things will go in the future. So this is a big conversation, and it was really tough for me to I guess decide that there was even a bigger topic inside of this episode, partly because I feel like a lot of my whole podcast is about this. But there's one more element about this circumstance that makes my spirit really sad, because I've been talking to one of my boys who lives in heart space, and he has shared with me not any details or names, but about girls in his high school who've experienced things that are far worse than this. And oh man, this just plays on my heart, because then they are gaslit by these boys saying, you're the one who started it, you're the one, all these things, and trying to turn it around when they've essentially, so much as even rape. This is really heavy for me, because I think that as women, we need to hold space for each other. And then, as men, the same way that my boy is helping hold their hearts as they go through rumors that are untrue about them, these girls, and things being spread about them. And I become really sad, because I was talking to my son and one of his friends, and I just said, listen, let me ask you, what do you think is the biggest contributing factor to this happening? Because this is happening, it's happened to lots of girls, and I've encouraged them to make sure that they're talking about it to their parents, that they take action, that there's, something that goes on, that there's something even on the school level, legally, all of the business, right? Because there has to be some confrontation about it so that the behavior can correct. But I asked them, what do you think is the biggest predictor or cause of this? And they both were like, I don't know. And they were kind of making some guesses, like maybe social media, maybe, whatever they were trying to. And, we talked about it and got to the point where we were talking about pornography and the effect that it has on our brain, and how when people partake in pornography, it's not enough. And then it's not enough and not enough and not enough, right? So then they start seeing more violent things, and then they start bringing that to life. And this is just for me, like, I guess to kind of just have a voice in this area, to be able to say, like, every single thing that you do in your life to fight this, drug, like, good job. good job, because there's a lot of people hurting. And I'll tell you about these boys that did this to me at that party. They were listening. I mentioned in the last episode, they were listening. It's the same boys who would walk up to me and say nasty things in my ear and make nasty sounds. And they would sing out loud the rap songs that they were listening to. And they were vulgar and bad, like terrible. And so the exposure is so vital. Like, I saw a picture this week of a television set, kind of like an old school television set. Imagine this is kind of a cartoon. And then someone's sitting on the couch and their head is kind of sliced at the top and like open, you know? And then all of this, it just looked like sludge going from the television set into the brain with pieces of trash mixed in. And what we expose ourselves to, we become. It's a very vital message. And so I just wanted to have a voice around that. And then also kind of mention that when I was in college, in my church, we had a little group where some women who had kind of, you know, been done wrong by men. Doesn't matter if it was like in their family or in relationships or whatever circumstances. We got together and had dinner once a month. And we had different things we would talk through, and just really all that it wasn't really heavy. It wasn't like we went through a lot of things, but we were just there to support each other. So we talked about some things. We had sometimes like therapists come in and different things, but the group was to support each other and say, I see you. So to me, I think, how beautiful is that? I wish every woman, you're right, who's AKA done wrong by a man, had a group like that. And I think something that's important to point out about a group like that is that when you come together, you can come together to support each other, or you can come together to be victims. So it's really vital to figure out the vibration behind the coming together. Because when we support each other, when we lift each other, when we help each other see that what we experienced isn't what's true about the entire world, about everything we're going to experience, then it helps correct it in our life. And these groups are so vital and good to have these kinds of voices surrounding us, in addition to everything else that they need to support them through whatever level they experience. And I, trust me, just so you know, I did say to my son, are they all girls? Because I know it can go the other way, okay? I know it can go the other way. But in this circumstance, it was all girls. In this circumstance, it was me, a girl, you know, having this happen. Oh, there's a lot to even say inside of the vibrations that we carry, that we're a part of, and how we don't even feel comfortable around people with really low vibrations when we are living in high vibration, thus minimizing the chances of some of these things happening, right? There's no amount of saying like it was anyone's fault because of a way that they live. But, you know, when you don't feel comfortable around someone, you don't hang out with them, period. You just don't. And so if you are raising your vibration, it's another level of helping you have discernment, I guess, right? There's a lot more that my voice can say around this topic. This is a topic that I feel is very near and dear to my heart because I get it. I get it from a level of things that happened to me at a party. I get it from a level of things that happened after that, right? The manipulation, the brainwash, all the things that were in the previous, you know, all the episodes from my journal. But I just wanted to have a voice around that and say, it actually also helps my heart that he had those feelings, that he had great regret, that Jake did have a lot of regret over sort of just standing by and watching that. As I'm sure that a lot of people at that party and subsequent parties where lots of things happened to other people that they have regret. So let's be people. Let's make a pact right now that we're the kind of people that when someone is being done wrong or suffering or, kind of like the Good Samaritan, right? We take the time to stop and help. So that topic actually really ties into what I want to talk to you about when we get in trouble, and how what we believe about ourselves determines the actions that we take. And so in that circumstance, when we know that something's wrong, when we've really learned that it's not okay for, a guy to treat a girl like that, or a group of guys, or whatever the circumstance is, or a girl with other guys bullying or being, whatever it is, doesn't matter. When we know it's wrong, the more we know, the more that we believe about us, about the way that we act, the more that we will take a stand, right? It's all part of growing. And so I want to talk with you about this and get a little bit deeper into that, and about what happens when we get into trouble in our life, right? So Jake began the entry talking about how he was in trouble. How he had gotten caught drinking at a party and he was grounded. Things were not going his way. And it kind of had brought him into this melancholy mood, right? Where then he was aware of a lot of other things that were happening that he was also sad about. And so I want to address that when we're in trouble ourselves, or when we're in the struggle, it's a deep belief of mine that I think we are just forgetting who we are. I think that when we struggle, we are losing sight of what we have once known about ourselves. And I believe that that's true about all of us. And so one of the most powerful things that we can do is to be reminded of who we are, or to remind a child who's struggling about who they are. I think I've shared before that one time when I was living in Las Vegas and things were really tough and I was really struggling and I got really down. And I was talking to one of my friends and she said, "Mish, you're just forgetting who you are." And she brought me over a CD of songs that she knew that I would resonate, that would, bring me back into a space. And maybe, I think, a shake, just to pour a little bit of love over me. But it was her words of forgetting who I was that really stayed with me. And I want to talk to you about what we actually believe about ourselves being what matters most in who we become. I want to start with a story about a tribe in Africa. In this tribe, when the birth date of the child is counted not from when they were born, nor from when they were conceived, but from the day that that child was thought of in its mother's mind. And when a woman decides that she will have a child, she goes off and sits under a tree by herself. And she listens until she can hear the song of the child that wants to come. And after she has heard the song of this child, she comes back to the man who will be the child's father and teaches the song to him. And then, when they physically conceive the child, some of that time they sing the song of the child as a way to invite it, to invite this spirit. And then when the mother is pregnant, the mother teaches that child's song to the midwives and the old women of the village, so that when the child is born, the old women and the people around her sing the child's song to welcome it. And then, as the child grows up, the other villagers are taught the child's song. If the child falls or hurts its knee, someone picks it up and sings its song to it. Or perhaps the child does something wonderful or goes through the rites of puberty. Then, as a way of honoring this person, the people of the village sing his or her song. In the African tribe, there's one other occasion upon which the villagers sing to the child. If at any time during his or her life, the person commits a crime or does something awful, the individual is called into the center of the village, and the people in the community form a circle around them. Then they sing their song to them. The tribe recognizes that the correction for antisocial behavior is not punishment. It's love and the remembrance of identity. When you recognize your own song, you have no desire or need to do anything that would hurt another. And it goes this way through their life. In marriage, the songs are sung together. And finally, when this child is lying in bed ready to die, all the villagers know his or her song, and they sing for the last time the song to that person. You may not have grown up in an African tribe that sings your song to you in crucial life transitions, but life is always reminding you when you're in tune with yourself and when you're not. When you feel good, that doing matches your song. And when you feel awful, it doesn't. In the end, we shall all recognize our song and sing it well. You may feel a little wobbly at times, but so have all the great singers. Just keep singing and you will find your way home. Oh, I love that story, and there's not even any credit to throw it to because it's written by an unknown person. But I love the way that a song can remind you of who you are. That concept fills my heart. And so we got to find what resonates with us, right? When we're in trouble, when we're struggling, what can help remind us about who we are. There's something that really piqued my interest that Craig Groeschel wrote about in The Power to Change. He talked about a study that had been done where there were 3 questions that our subconscious mind actually asks in milliseconds that determine the action that we end up taking when we're presented with, turning right or left, essentially, in life. The 3 questions are, what type of person am I? What kind of situation is this? And what does a person like me do in a situation like this? And in a millisecond, our brain answers those questions. What we believe about ourselves actually determines the action that we'll take, and then the action that we take determines who we become, thus influencing who we actually believe we are. And it is this beautiful cycle, this beautiful circle. But sometimes we tend to listen to a different voice about ourselves. We listen to a voice that isn't as kind. We don't hear the side of the story that reminds us that we're good on the inside, or that we come from greatness, or, right, like we don't necessarily always hear all of the good about ourselves. And mind you, a lot of that story is coming from our own internal voice. Sometimes what we're hearing is a voice that's beating us up, that has disbelief in who we actually are. And then there's also the voices outside of us, right? The influence of people, messages, our world, vibrations, the subtle voice of the evil one that wants nothing more than to define us as our worst, or if nothing else, at least less than we are. For me, I like to say there's always 2 sides of what we can believe about ourselves. There's always 2 sides. There's always 2 different directions that we can go. And which side of the story do you want to believe? One of the things I really love is when I hear Mel Robbins talking about how she overcame her anxiety. And she starts to talk about when she used to identify as a person who has anxiety. And it wasn't until she started to identify as a person who feels anxiety that she started to have separation from it. That she started to become a person who was empowered to be able to do something about the anxiety that she felt. So then she was no longer defined as a person who carries it with her all the time. She was able to step into a different space around it. And she was able to address the feeling that she felt. She was able to help herself check into different feelings. And she was able to become something different because of what she believed about who she was. It's fascinating. So you're starting to kind of catch a glimpse that we do what we do because of what we believe we are, right? Who we think ourselves to be, how we see ourselves, what we identify with as our identity, right? There's a guy that I know, and I only know him because I know his wife, okay? But she has shared with me some details about his life, and I think that diving into this gives us just a little bit of a mind check, okay, around how we can shift with how we feel inside, with who we are identifying ourselves as. So I'm going to tell you about this guy. He's adopted, and in his adult years, he had a desire to seek out his biological mother and to start to learn more about his history, okay, where he came from and what she's like, and, you know, kind of fulfilling some questions that he had for his whole life. He figured out who she was. He tracked her down. He met with her, and she shared with him the story of his conception. And it's a very tragic and sad story. It was an event where his mother, I'm trying to figure out how to say this in case if you have little ears with you. His mother was attacked by many. Okay, we'll say it like that. And he doesn't even know which one is his father. He started to become different after learning this. He started to allow that information to define who he was. So he would call himself a monster. He thought he was a monster. Mind you, his whole life growing up, he didn't feel like a monster. But because he learned about his identity, right, where he came from, like what the person that contributed to his genetics, the choice that that person made, he then defined himself according to that. Which, just so you know, by the way, there is a ton of scientific research around how we can actually change, influence, and alter our genes, okay? Which is such cool work, and I geek out over that stuff. I think you all know that by now. But it was so interesting to me that he allowed his definition of who he is to be so altered because of information he was now privy to that he was never privy to before. And it's interesting to me to think about what his future would then be if he continues to buy into this thought. Because if our actions come from who we believe we are, and then that determines who we are, right? Then our belief about ourselves is pretty important. And I think if we're going to label ourselves, we should be pretty careful about the label that we assign. It doesn't matter who you are. Okay, it doesn't matter if you are adopted and you learn a crazy story about your family. Okay, it doesn't matter if you are pretty vanilla life. You grew up pretty standard, whatever normal really looks like, because there's really no normal, right? There's no normal. But whatever you associate with, my point is there's always another side of the coin. There's another side of the story that you can choose to believe. And so I think it's pretty interesting what we buy into, the voices that we listen to, and the identity that we associate with and that we agree with, whether we are aware we're doing it or not. So it's kind of a good thing to kind of try to really look at it and to ask yourself, that might be true, but is that the side of my life that I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on the fact that, I'm going to label myself a monster? Or do I want to label myself like, I've lived a really amazing life this far. I have some amazing children. I have a fantastic wife. There's different sides of the story, right? And so what do you surround yourself with? Who is your crew? I heard a story about a neighbor of mine, and he is a runner. When I say a runner, this guy doesn't just run marathons. He runs those kind of races that are like over 100 miles, which I think is just like so crazy. And of course, there's admiration behind it as well, because anyone who can push through something like that takes a lot of mental energy. Well, he tells this story of this race that he signed up for, okay? And I just know it was over 100 miles. I don't even know how many miles, okay? But he was telling this story, and he was in this race, and he signed up for it twice, and he dropped out both times, and then he signed up for a third time, and he made it all the way through. And what he attributes it to is the crew that he chose. So he attributes his success to the people he surrounded himself with, okay? Because on the first race, or maybe even the second, one of the races, his crew was his brother-in-law, who after, mile 45 looked at him and was like, dude, I don't even know what you're still doing trying to be in this, And that message messed him up. And he dropped out of the race, right? He wasn't receiving the right messages, the messages of encouragement and motivation and move forward and you can do this. He allowed the message that when he was in a weak spot, that weakened him even more. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the message that you allow to stick in your mind, to settle in your mind about who you are? Because if the science proves that the actions that you're about to take come from the deep-seated belief that happens in milliseconds from our subconscious mind, from the belief about who you believe that you are, it's kind of important to look at that message. What is settling in? James Clear says, every action you take is a vote for the person you want to become. Which I love that quote so much. And it starts even before the action. It starts inside of your brain with what you believe about you. What are the messages that you're buying into? And we can get really smart by surrounding ourselves with a really great crew to tell us great messages, to sing our song to us, to remind us of who we are. I heard a story about a guy who repeated the third step in the 12-step program over and over and over because he needed it. And I'll tell you what the third step is. The third step is telling your story. And this guy needed to tell his story 3 times a week so that he could be reminded of who he is. Because what you believe about who you are is the strongest predictor of who you will become. And sometimes it takes reminding ourselves, right? It's like what side of the story that you want to believe in. There's a quote from Wayne Dyer that says, remind yourself that you cannot fail at being yourself. There's only one of you. right? It's okay. We're not in competition with other people. You're only trying to be a better version of you every day. And even when you have setbacks, you're still being that, right? Because you learn from the setbacks and then it propels you even farther forward. So it's okay who you are and being yourself and having a full expression of who you are starts by accepting and loving that. One of the things that I really love knowing and understanding about our brain is that our brain can be really foggy, right, at times. And when our brain is foggy, it's difficult to grasp who we are. And when your brain becomes clear, you're more in touch with who you are. When your brain is more orderly, you feel more like yourself. And so we have to ask the question, well, how do we make our brain feel more orderly? Do you know how much is going on around me? Right? And that's just true. So I want to talk to you a little bit about heart coherence, because that's what I talk about. And I love it so much. And I think we have access to so many things through our heart. One of the greatest things about our heart is that when we are in heart coherence, our heart sends really clear messages to our brain. And when our heart is coherent, the other parts of our body, the other systems in our body, including our brain, are more coherent. Our heart sends more messages to our brain than our brain does to our heart. So if we make the decision to do our best to get into heart coherence, okay, and remember, heart coherence is a state that you can get into simply by breathing, having calm, steady breaths, and then dropping into a heart feeling. It's as simple as that. You can do it with silence. I did it with my group coaching. I mean, we do it all the time in my coaching course. But in the intro of our course last week, we just did a really quick, 4-minute drop-in where we just started breathing and we called up a memory of something that we were grateful for in the last 24 hours. And we just allowed ourselves to sit and really swim in this feeling of anything that caused us to feel those heart feelings. And the more you practice it, the more access you have to it. And I can't wait, because what's next for me, my next chapter, is being able to create a meditation app for you where you can access different meditation. I'm calling them packets right now because I don't know, I haven't thought well enough forward, but I know I'm offering groupings of meditations where you have you can buy a group of meditations 10 at a time or something like that. And all of them will be centered around heart coherence. And then there will be some that are dedicated individually to heart coherence. So I can't wait to be able to offer this to you. I hope you're getting hyped about it. But the bottom line is that when we're in heart coherence, our brain is getting more clear. When our brain gets more clear, we're more in touch with who we really are, with what's really us, which is light and incredibleness, okay? Expansion for your capabilities expands so much in this state. And so becoming aware of who you really are is greatly complemented by heart coherence. There's a quote that is attributed to Buddhist vision, and it says, "The mind is like water. When it is turbulent, it's difficult to see. When it's calm, everything becomes clear." So if there's any amount of you that gets lit up a little bit about heart coherence and the idea that it can help your brain become more clear and it can bring you online to becoming more in tune with who you are, to being more capable of choosing the side of the story that you want to associate with, being more capable of hearing the messages around you and what's being said so that you can carefully choose the crew that you place around you. Being able to hear the side of truth about who you are that you actually want to believe. Having that song sung to your soul and the feeling that comes with it. That is incredible. And so interesting to go back to what started the conversation in the first place about when we're in trouble, when we're in struggle, Jake being in trouble, Jake being in struggle, even to the very beginning of the story when I talked about what happened to me at Mackenzie's birthday party. And what happened in my mind after that happened. Look, I could have attributed a story about myself from that event that would have created my life moving forward. Or I can look at other truths. It's the same with you. We all have defining moments in our life. Remember how I told you about my son and about how he knew about some specific girls who had gone through some horrific things. Not only gone through the event, but then relive it because of all the rumors and the things that are at school. And he said, basically, ruining their life. And I said to him, honey, no matter what you go through, and I used the word rape specifically. No matter what, that doesn't ruin your life. If anything, it brings you more information about what to surround yourself with, what you want to believe in, who you want to be. Reminding yourself that you have a choice in what you believe. And going clear back to podcasts in the early days, of my dad saying, the very night that I told him that I was pregnant, and he said to me, Mish, there's a lot of people who are going to judge you and be mean to you and all of those things. And your job with those people is not to pay them any mind. Because I know my dad knew that if I did, that would shape my life. That would have become my crew. But knowing that we get to choose our crew, he directed me to the people who were cheering for me, who cared about me, and he told me to keep them in my corner. He told me those were the ones to give my attention to listen to. That's incredible advice. So remember that no matter who you are, no matter what you've been through, there's different levels of who you are that you can buy into. And there are ways for you to truly get in tune with your heart so that you can really get clear on who you really are. Because who you really are, your most natural and real state is light, high vibration, and bliss. And you were designed so that your life force, your energy and your vibration would have the capability to love other people into life. Anytime you're out of sync with that, or something that resonates like that, it's just time to check in and to be reminded of who you really are. I hope that you can see that being really clear about who you are, your true identity, that brings you more power than you thought you had. Thank you so much for joining me today and for going through some stories and looking at your own life and for being a courageous, devoted person who actually has a desire to improve their life. I'm pretty aware that there's no one listening to this podcast that doesn't have a desire to improve, that doesn't have a desire to make movement in a good direction in their life. Because that's what this podcast is about. That's the bottom line of what kind of threads it all together, right? And so I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you. On this podcast, remember there's 2 things that I kind of ask you to do often because it really means a lot. And I would just love it if you support the podcast by rating it, by leaving a review. You guys, you have no idea how the reviews truly help. I'm just going to tell you. I'm just going to stop right here and tell you. I'm not even going to tell you the other thing that I remind you about often because I want to just tell you about this one thing. There's a website called Listen Notes. And on Listen Notes, people kind of can go and check your podcast rating. You can see like how well your podcast is performing. And mine is not registering, okay? I need your help. I need your help. I actually have reached out to the company because it should be showing up. But essentially the only feedback they've given me is that I do have to have more ratings for it to show up because it's somehow tripped in the system and I need it. I need it. I mean, to be able to show up there. For other reasons, I don't know. It's not like I need it. Whatever. It just helps my podcast grow, the algorithm, the whole thing. I'm telling you, your 3 sentences that you write, whatever you want to write, would help me so much. So if you have not rated and reviewed the podcast, if you would just take literally 3 minutes after this podcast and just look at where you receive your podcast, it's right there. You can just scroll down and you can click stars to rate it, and then you can push leave a review and you can leave a rating. You can just write 2 or 3 sentences like I think Misha's cuckoo. I think she's woo-woo. Or you can say whatever it is that you want about the podcast that you would want someone else to know if they were considering listening. And that's what they really want to know. So if you'll take just a minute, that would mean so much to me. I seriously love you. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for being a person that's dedicated to improving. And with that, I'll just remind you that the number 1 predictor of who you are is what you do. Okay, and the number 1 predictor of what you do is who you believe you are. So be careful in defining you, because you are worth every ounce of telling yourself the right truth. Until next time, my friend.